A radar screen on an Israeli Sa'ar-6 corvette flashes a single, tiny contact low on the water, moving fast toward the ship. Not a jet. Not a missile in the usual sense. It's a small boat loaded with explosives and no one aboard, and by the time the crew confirms it as a threat, they have only seconds to react. The Israeli Navy says this is the scenario it now drills for constantly in the Red Sea, and according to Israeli military statements and reporting from outlets including USNI News and Naval News, it has become one of the defining threats shaping how the fleet operates south of Eilat. Why has a navy built around submarines, missile corvettes, and coastal defense spent the past 2 years drilling against small drone boats built by a militia thousands of kilometers from Israel's shores? To answer that, we need to look at what the Israeli Navy says it's defending against, what tools it's using, and why the Red Sea has become one of the most closely watched maritime corridors on Earth. Here's what's publicly documented. Since late 2023, the Yemen-based Houthi movement, widely described by Western governments and defense analysts as receiving weapons, training, and intelligence support from Iran, has repeatedly targeted commercial and military vessels transiting the southern Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. According to statements from the U.S. Navy, the United Kingdom's Maritime Trade Operations Office, and multiple defense outlets, these attacks have included anti-ship ballistic and cruise missiles, one-way attack drones, and uncrewed surface vessels, sometimes called USVs or drone boats, packed with explosives and designed to strike a ship's hull below the waterline. The Israeli Navy has confirmed publicly that its vessels operating in and near the Red Sea, including the area around the southern port city of Eilat, have been placed on a heightened defensive posture because of this threat picture. In October 2023, the Israeli missile corvette INS Eilat, a Sa'ar 5 class vessel, was struck by what the Israeli military described as a missile or drone fired from Houthi-controlled territory in Yemen. Official statements at the time confirmed the ship sustained damage and that several crew members were injured, though Israel did not disclose full technical details of the strike, and independent verification of the exact munition used remains limited in open sources. There's a detail that stuck with defense observers watching this over the past 2 years. Unlike a fighter jet or a warship, a small drone boat can look, on radar, almost identical to a fishing skiff or a piece of floating debris. That's the core technical problem the Israeli Navy says its drills are built around. A USV of the kind used in the Red Sea theater can have a radar cross-section small enough to blend into ordinary maritime traffic until it's a few kilometers out, at which point the window to identify, classify, and if necessary, neutralize it closes fast. We went through open-source Israeli Navy statements and defense press coverage from 2024 and 2025, and one thing kept surfacing. Officials framed this less as a single dramatic threat and more as a persistent, grinding detection problem. That's the first real obstacle. Distinguishing a hostile, uncrewed boat from ordinary Red Sea maritime traffic in a crowded, narrow waterway used by thousands of commercial vessels a year isn't something conventional naval radar was originally built to do at speed and at scale. The Israeli Navy has responded by layering its detection approach. Surface radar on Sa'ar, 6 corvettes, aerial surveillance drones, and, according to Israeli defense officials, greater reliance on shore-based and aerial early warning assets to extend the detection range before a small craft gets close enough to matter. The detection problem was one thing, but even once a threat is confirmed, Israeli officials say a second obstacle emerges. What do you actually shoot it down with when the target is small, cheap, and expendable, and your interceptor may cost vastly more than the thing it's destroying? That mismatch, cost per intercept versus cost per attack, shaped what came next in the Israeli Navy's approach to this threat. To address that cost problem, the Israeli Navy has leaned on a naval variant of its layered air defense architecture. The Sa'ar 6 class corvettes, which entered Israeli service starting in 2020, are equipped with the Sea Dome system, a naval adaptation of the land-based Iron Dome interceptor built by Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, according to Israeli defense industry statements and reporting by Naval News. T-Dome is designed to intercept short-range aerial threats, including rockets, mortars, and drones at sea, giving the corvette a defense layer against exactly the kind of low, small, fast-moving targets a drone boat or attack UAV presents. The Sa'ar 6 platform also carries the Barak 8 missile system, a longer-range naval air defense missile jointly developed by Israel Aerospace Industries and India's Defense Research and Development Organization, which Israeli officials say provides coverage against a broader range of aerial and, in some configurations, surface threats. For context, And this is general background on how naval point defense systems work rather than a claim about any single incident. Layered ship defense typically combines several rings. Long-range missiles like Barrack 8 meant to engage threats far from the ship, shorter-range interceptors like Sea Dome for closer, faster-reacting engagements, and close-in gun systems as a last resort if everything else fails. The idea, common across modern navies including the U.S. Navy's Aegis-equipped destroyers, is to give a crew multiple chances to stop an incoming threat before it reaches the hull. Israeli officials have publicly stated that Red Sea operations helped accelerate some of these naval air defense programs, though the precise scope of that acceleration hasn't been fully detailed in open Israeli defense budget disclosures. What stands out most is how closely this mirrors what's happening across other navies at the same time. The U.S. Navy, operating in the same waters as part of what was publicly named Operation Prosperity Guardian and later Operation Poseidon Archer, has repeatedly intercepted Houthi missiles and drones using Arleigh Burke-class destroyers equipped with the Aegis combat system, according to U.S. Central Command statements. The United Kingdom's Royal Navy has done the same with HMS Diamond and other Type 45 destroyers. Put together, what's happening in the Red Sea looks less like one country's naval drill and more like a live fire proving ground for how modern navies handle cheap, disposable, uncrewed threats, a problem that barely existed for most surface fleets a decade ago. The technical fix was only part of the picture, though. Even a well-defended corvette bristling with interceptors runs into a problem no missile system can solve on its own: the sheer geography of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait itself, a choke point barely 30 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, through which a significant share of global container shipping and a large share of the world's seaborne oil trade normally passes. That geography is why this story extends well beyond Israel. According to shipping industry data cited by Reuters and multiple maritime insurers, traffic through the Bab el-Mandeb and the wider Red Sea corridor dropped sharply through 2024 as commercial shippers rerouted vessels around the Cape of Good Hope in southern Africa to avoid the threat zone entirely, adding roughly 1 to 2 weeks of transit time and significant fuel cost per voyage. For Israel specifically, the port of Eilat, its only direct maritime outlet to the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba, and onward trade routes to Asia and East Africa, has reported severe drops in shipping traffic and revenue, a fact Israeli port authorities have confirmed publicly. Here's the take that will likely draw some disagreement. Calling this purely a drone boat threat understates what's actually a much bigger strategic problem. A militia with a fraction of a conventional navy's budget has, with cheap uncrewed systems and missiles, materially disrupted a global trade route and forced multiple advanced navies into a defensive, reactive posture for well over a year. Whether you view that as a remarkable asymmetric success for the Houthis and their backers, or as an inevitable consequence of leaving a choke point underdefended for too long, is a genuinely open argument among naval analysts, and reasonable people land in different places on it. So here's a real question worth sitting with. A small fraction of the interceptors used to stop these threats can cost more than the boats or drones being intercepted. Is the current approach, expensive, high-end naval missile defense against low-cost expendable threats, actually sustainable if this kind of asymmetric maritime harassment becomes a template used elsewhere? We're curious what you think, and it's the kind of question defense budgets are already wrestling with behind closed doors. The timeline here is also worth being precise about, because this is where confirmed fact and unconfirmed reporting need to stay clearly separate. It's confirmed, from official Israeli, American, and British statements, that Houthi forces have launched missiles, drones, and uncrewed boats at vessels in the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb since late 2023, and that Israeli, American, and British warships have intercepted a significant number of these attacks. It's also confirmed that Iran has provided the Houthi movement with weapons and technical support, according to assessments repeatedly stated by the U.S. State Department, the UN panel of experts on Yemen, and independent research groups tracking weapons debris recovered from failed strikes. What isn't fully confirmed in open sources is the precise operational chain of command. How much of any specific attack is directed by Iranian advisors in real time versus carried out by Houthi forces on their own initiative using Iranian-supplied equipment and training? Analysts differ on how tightly Tehran controls day-to-day targeting decisions, and Israeli officials, U.S. officials, and independent researchers have offered varying assessments rather than a single agreed answer. There's also a further wrinkle worth naming, honestly. Identifying exactly which Israeli Navy exercises are explicitly billed as anti-drone boat drills versus broader readiness exercises that happen to include this threat as one scenario among several isn't always clear from public Israeli military statements, which frequently describe training in general terms for operational security reasons. When Israeli defense correspondents and outlets like Naval News report on these drills, they're often working from statements the Israeli Navy has chosen to release publicly. Official social media posts showing corvettes firing Sea Dome interceptors during exercises, and occasional briefings to accredited defense reporters, not from independently observed, unfiltered access to classified training plans. That's a normal limitation of open-source defense reporting on any navy, not something specific to Israel, but it's worth being upfront about rather than presenting drill details as more precisely confirmed than they actually are. There's a piece of this story we deliberately left out for length, and because it strays into difficult-to-verify territory. Reports on the specific technical composition of some intercepted Houthi drone boats, including claims about the sourcing of onboard guidance components. If that's something you want us to dig into in a dedicated follow-up, say so in the comments and we'll consider it for a future video. Where does this stand right now, as of this reporting? The Israeli Navy continues to describe Red Sea operations and defense against uncrewed threats as an ongoing priority, according to its public statements. Commercial shipping through the Bab el-Mandeb remains well below pre-2023 levels according to maritime traffic data, and the broader coalition response involving the United States, the United Kingdom, and periodically other partner navies continues, according to Pentagon and Royal Navy statements, though the intensity of Houthi attacks has fluctuated over time in step with the wider regional situation, including developments related to the Gaza ceasefire process. What remains genuinely uncertain, and we're not going to pretend to know, is how long this defensive posture will need to continue, and whether the current mix of high-end interceptors against low-cost threats is a durable long-term solution or simply the best available answer for now. If you want to verify any of this yourself, official U.S. Navy and Israeli Ministry of Defense statements, along with dedicated defense outlets that track this closely, are the best starting points, and we'll list several of them below.